that I think I just misspelled something on. I realized, but um, uh, yeah, it has links to a few things, some resources, and also a link to the page of questions. I can go through them, and people can just jump in and talk,
Yeah.
and we can get going right away with the questions. I think after
Yeah.
talking a little bit about the art ecosystem of
That would be very interesting to start from, because I'm also very curious about your perspective, because there is I can imagine ecosystems, but they're different, and I think that if we could concentrate on differences, that would be really great, because that's really important. I think for you know, young artists that I remember myself still being as, and very often I just feel on the same position, really. I think there's plenty to talk, really plenty to talk.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, to me, what made me smile with the questions is, I mean, and I'll address this in this a little bit, is you know, I know it all sounds very American, and
Right.
does that work here? That doesn't work like that everywhere. So I think that's also important to address, just these kind of ideas, you
Yeah.
know, in different parts of the world,
Absolutely,
especially.
absolutely. This is really something that made me feel, yeah, you're the perfect person now. After also a while of a break, because the series of lectures, you actually first one and the last one in this semester, in this academic year, there were some problems with budget, and rescheduling the other lectures. But I was really thinking that this is actually a very good start for a next season. Uh, with your recognition, not only of as you're saying, the ecosystem, but also on the basis of, which I'm going to mention, of your experience of interviewing other artists, because there are many things that they may share in common with their sort of existential experiences. I think it would be worth to point out that, especially for the people who are like just out of the college or still in the college.
Yeah, yeah. I think in general the theme of what I'm talking about is the conversation, that you need to
Yeah.
have a conversation with people. You need to talk, and the interviews is one of those things, right? It's about talking.
Yeah.
It's not just, you know, what kind of art do you make? How do you do this? It's a conversation, and that's what helps everyone. And
Right.
and how to have that conversation, of course, is the complex thing. Where does it start? Where does it go to? How does it, you know, that's the.
Absolutely.
So Dominic, how are you? Where are you? Are you in Venice now?
No, I'm in you see, in Berlin, in my studio, on the old Lufthansa chairs.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I imagine you in you look like you're in like Prague in the top of an old house that's, you know, an attic or something, but maybe that,
The attic is my studio in Berlin. We're
yeah.
back from Venice. The show is mad. The whole thing is mad. I mean, we can have a longer conversation about that later on.
Right. But exciting. I mean, it's going well.
Yeah, I
It's
think so. It's very successful in many ways.
oh, congratulations. Yeah, it's exciting.
Yeah, this is something also I would like to point out, maybe in terms of this idea that how do you deal with the structure, or whether you always have to submit to the structure, or if the structure does not accept you, maybe you just create your own, which
Hmm.
is the example of this pavilion, because I was not invited for the Polish pavilion, and I was not invited for any other pavilion. So literally, I invented my own one.
You did? How did you do that? I don't understand. How
I
did you invent your own
invented the pavilion. I made it happen. That there is a new pavilion, but it was my invention, basically, to make it happen.
But then how did it become part of the official
It's not part of the official. It's the guerrilla event. It's something which just happened, and
it's a guerrilla event. It's not, and it's not a collateral event
it's not
either.
a collateral event. No, it's the pavilion, but it's a pavilion on the island of the former psychiatrist asylum. So how do you imagine the mad people to be a collateral? I mean, it can only be guerrilla in it.
Yeah, I hope to come out there. That's exciting. Yeah, no, but I also think that's important to. I was trying to write that down. Submit or not to submit to the structure, because you know, the book, which we're partly riffing off, is a structure, right? More or less. And there's a million other ways to do things. You could you don't have to submit to the structure of the academic art world, of a lot of different art worlds. You know,
Yeah.
there's a lot of options to do it, right? And what you did is, you know, is exactly that. But also, by not submitting to the structure, what's interesting is then you are also within a structure of Venice,
No,
right?
I play within a structure. I think this is also something worth. How do you play with the structure, or how to use the already existing structure to maybe subvert it, or find your own way, not necessarily sort of queuing in a line.
Right. Well, that was some of the answers to the questions, because I did just write them all out, and there's a link to it in here too, all the questions. But yeah, some people were saying, yeah, but you say this and this, and I don't see that, doesn't seem appropriate to do. And and part of my answer was, you can be an artist, you can do anything, you can be really weird, and
Yeah.
you don't have to be polite in a certain way or something. You can be as eccentric as you want, really.
How weird do you want me to be?
Right. So let me see. I can also. I don't have to share a screen, but I see. I can. I can just share a screen.
We may still, yeah, you can share a screen, and then I think we may still wait for like a couple minutes for the students to appear. That they'll be coming.
Okay. Can I test the screen share? Should I test that?
I think there's this.
Yeah. Let me see. No, I've got it. Oh, I see.
Oh, there's Kinga.
Tak, jestem. Dzień dobry. Hello.
Kinga is a PhD student of mine, and she's keen to show, if you like to, some of her works also, if we would be about to discuss it or use it as for you as a sort of part of part.
Sure. Yeah. At the end of the questions, yes, what I was thinking, we could do that. Yeah, I might not be able to share a thing. I could. Let me see.
Why?
Can I
use the rectangle with arrow? Yeah.
The what?
Yeah, on the bottom, this rectangle with this
The
arrow.
problem is I have to quit Chrome to give it the permission that I just gave it, which means it would close out this session. So I could do that. I could close it out and come right back.
We can just wait for you.
Okay.
No worries.
Okay, we'll wait for you. It's not a problem.
Okay. Let me just make sure I'm doing that right. Oh, wait a minute.
Hello, Naira.
Yeah. I see.
Pawle, ty nagrywasz to, tak?
Tak, cały czas.
Dzień dobry, panie Krzysztofie.
Cześć, Ewa.
Dzień dobry.
Dzień dobry.
Oh,
Hello.
you're back. Great.
Okay. We can hear you. Bo my go nie słyszymy, bo on ma wyciszony mikrofon, a ja nie mogę go włączyć.
Right. Yeah. Great.
Dominik, czy ty go słyszysz?
Brian, I cannot hear you.
All right, apologies. Yeah, okay, we're all set now then. Yeah, I see the chat and everything all set up.
Yeah.
So what should we do? Should we begin? Should we do?
I would wait like 3 more minutes, maybe.
Okay, yeah, fine.
And then we'll just start, and maybe the rest of the people will join us.
Okay, yeah, no rush.
It's an intense moment because it's the end of the term, so people are a little bit mad now with trying to put things together for the final.
When is the actual end?
Well, it's happening now. It's now.
Yeah, but have things just passed, or are all deadlines tomorrow or something?
No, not necessarily. I mean, we already had assessments with Eva. Eva is my assistant at my course. So we over with that, but there are all other studios. There are many other things are happening. It's like there will be a final show which will start at the end of this month. So people are a little bit
Well, good. So yeah, sharing that. I'll put the link in here to this also. Well, actually, the link is. Yeah, here's also the link to that document, which I could. So the whole Q&A is right here too. That's
right.
If something doesn't work in this on this end, but that's the answers to all those. I mean, those aren't grammatically correct answers. They're a little bit sketches, but we can go through that. I can go off of that a little bit. Right, and then there's the interviews here. This is the
right. Yeah.
I don't know why it looks so. Oh, it looks so big because the. That's interesting.
Fantastic.
Whoops. Yeah, I don't usually use this. I'm using Zoom. Google. This is Google Meet. It's a little bit different, right?
Yeah, it's sort of yeah. That's the university standard here, unfortunately.
Right. That's so interesting, right? Yeah, universities have their own world of
Yeah.
their own standards.
Yeah, I know Zoom is much more flexible, but there we are. Hey. Well.
So how is Berlin? How is Berlin these days?
Just about to turn into summer. Yeah. It's yeah. I would say lively place. Good to stay at the moment, I guess.
Mm.
Yeah, I'm trying to slow down for a moment. I don't know if it's going to be possible with my obligations, but you know, trying to recover after Venice exhibition.
Right.
So, but yeah, and as you know, the most of our students are actually based in Poznan because that's where I run the painting course.
Right.
Which is the part of the university which had the privilege to invite you for your today talk.
Mm.
So I was there like yesterday, and
So tell me about the people here so far. These are all painters, and these are
yeah, mostly from what I see now, it's more they're mostly from my class. As you can tell, this pretty international group of people from different parts of the world, not only from Poland. There are also PhD students who joined us, and well, I think the conversation can be very interesting also on the basis that some of them are running their own spaces, like Krzysztof Mentel in Poznan, non-for-profit gallery spaces. So I think that there are all these differences that we can also discuss during our meeting about your perspective, the way how you see it, about your sort of New York-based experience, and the way how it all looks in Poznan, in Poland, what applies, what doesn't. Also regarding my recognition of what's happening in Berlin at the moment. So I think we have these few kind of angles that we can approach the subject.
sure.
Can make it really interesting.
Okay, yeah, that's good. So yeah, the talk about the art ecosystem and how all these things move together.
Right.
Sounds like it'll be appropriate. So artists are here. Artist run space. Director, founder is here.
Also, Agata Rogosz is a curator I worked with for quite some time.
And the level of education, there's undergraduate and PhD here.
This is well, we run the painting course, which consists of the BA students, MA students, and I'm also responsible for promoting PhD students within the same university structure. So it's a pretty sort of the varied crowd of the people now here, and they're still joining.
Okay.
People who are still at school, and of course they desperately seek for the questions what's after. Most of the universities, and as much as I would consider for various reasons, the Poznań University as a really good school. I would say that I mean your presence here is also very important because, as you also mentioned in your other like statements and interviews, that those questions, what's next, very often are not being taken at stake during the courses. So of course everybody who studies wants to not to study indefinitely, but of course we indefinite, for some reasons we are indefinite students, as I could say, and every artist is an indefinite student. But on the other hand, the people just want to at least have an idea what would be the next steps that they could do, or they could not do, or they shouldn't really be doing because it's a waste of time. So I think these things are very, very important, starting from BA students and to finish on the generation like myself. Still, yeah.
Right, sure.
Okay, I think we may slowly start. If you feel like it, of course.
Sure. I can jump right in. Should we just begin? Yeah. So it's live. It doesn't. I have a record. Oh no, that's your record button. Okay. So
this is okay, right? Because
yeah, I can just start right now. Yeah.
Somebody would miss. We would very much appreciate if your talk could be archived, so there will be an access.
Sure. So record it if you want. Yeah. We'll start now.
Okay. So. As usually, I say a few words at the beginning.
Okay.
Which is my sort of obligation. So I mean, I have just to start short. I have a wonderful, fantastic pleasure to host Brainerd Curry on this as a one with his talk today. As one of the talks from the series which I have initiated about almost 2 years ago, which is called the Sealed Studio Talks. The actual idea originated during the time of a pandemia, so we were looking for another options to meet interesting people and to meet people who could share with us their insights from all sorts of areas. That are related to art in general. So, at that time of this, as I repeat this statement, that at the time of this particularly solitary confinement, we believe that with our effort, the forced physical distance can be reshaped into the advantage of the greater proximity and exchange of ideas. And that's what we've been doing. We had the chance to host one of the most prominent theoreticians, art critics, curators, and artists in our series. And I think after a while of the break, we have now a pleasure to host somebody who I would say is also a great complement to our series, because Brainerd actually had the chance to interview running the university Yale Radio to interview thousands of artists. It was like 1,400 or something, Brainerd, am I correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Which is pretty amazing, and it gives us an amazing overview also, thanks to your knowledge gained through this series of fantastic interviews. I had the privilege to also be one of the interviewed artists in this series. That can really we can really profit on today. Brainerd Curry is, as you wrote in your short statement, you're an artist, educator, and an author, and you co-founded the artistic collaborative practice with your wife, Delia Curry, and as a host of a popular, as I was mentioned already, popular radio, university radio show. You interviewed over 106,000 artists so far, which is pretty impressive. There are also activities that you are very that you're involved with. To mention your co-founded Praxis and also the Museum of Invisible Art, which I strongly recommend everybody to look at. You also participated in Whitney Biennale in 2002 with your incredible performance, which you also, I think, which also ended up all kind of related to the book that you wrote, which is The Art of Hugging. Which is one of the series of books that I also very much recommend to everybody. You are an author of the books, which I can also at the moment list, but they are available and we are going to order them also to our university library, like Making It in the Art World, the new approaches to galleries, shows and raising money, new markets for artists, how to sell found projects and exhibit using social media, DIY, pop-ups, eBay, Kickstarter, and much more. Sell online like a creative genius, a guide for artists, entrepreneurs, inventors, and kindred spirits. The Art World Demystified, how artists define and achieve their goals. Succeed with social media like a creative genius, a guide to artists, entrepreneurs, inventors, and kindred spirits. And it's just a few to mention. So this talk, I would say it's also a very special talk in our series, because we, unlike the other lectures which we were discussing, mainly philosophically related themes related to arts, I would say this one is more about the philosophy of living and surviving, and also kind of grabbing the more general idea than just a local one that we maybe more or less attached to it with our students' practice. The more general idea how to function and also navigate within the art world from the more general perspective. Your perspective, Brainerd, is specifically New York-based perspective, and I really hope that we can actually share and compare during this conversation and your talk our experiences that are based on the different parts of the world, really. So this is going to be I'm really excited about your talk, and it's going to be really exciting conversation, I think so. So we all yours now, and let's start, and then we'll eventually join you with our questions and remarks. Welcome, Brainerd.
Thank you so much. So let's see. I want to get to the questions almost immediately, kind of reverse the process of the typical lecture presentation. Often I have dozens of slides and kind of instructional things, but instead I want to show you a few resources, talk about the ecosystem, and then get right to questions. And people can just jump in now and ask questions too. But you know, when I was talking with Dominic about, you know, my books, the experience of the radio is often about what artists could do or should do. And that's very different, of course, than what not to do, right? And so to jump to something just quick, what not to do is I made this website a while ago called howsmydealing.com. I'll put it in the chat here too. And this is a user-generated website, and so it's just artists who are uploading experiences of scams in the art world internationally. And so, you know, the scams are everything from galleries that are asking you to pay money, consultants that aren't real asking you to pay money, residencies that are, you know, nothing more than a kind of a room to stay in, and overpriced art fairs people pay to be at, biennials that people pay to be in, like the Florence Biennial, publications that you pay to be in, and then mail scams. Yeah. So, you know, I mean, I'm a pretty my whole presentation tends to be very very kind of this American encouraging and telling you what to do. But just to start on this note, you can see right here, I agree with the original poster. So if you click here, you see the whole, you see the original post. And everyone's posting anonymously. That's how it's set up. This one is by the Arctic Circle Residency. And you see the most recent post, which was the one that's, well, let me see. Now I missed it, but the original. I just changed the navigation system on this. So this just came in, this post. I agree with the original poster. Much is promised with this residency that is not delivered. There was no scientists on board. It's sponsored by a shell organization that was set up by the individual director. This is not a research expedition. You will not motor around the fjords in a boat that can be hired for pleasure cruises. Requesting, so it's some of them also respond, and some people say these are like the galleries kind of building themselves up. Other things are art fairs like this that are also extract money from artists somehow. So okay, that's just the first resource of what not to do, right? Don't spend money on things that are worthless because it's manipulating your ego somehow as an artist, right? This is global. It will probably not stop anytime soon. Any questions on that before I go forward? Just the idea of scams, artists being stolen from. Okay, so this next one, this is an interviews program that Dominic was talking about. The links will be here, but these are the interviews. I'm interviewing a lot of different artists through Yale University Radio, and I've interviewed over 1,500 so far. So I've learned a lot about how artists talk about their work, right? And from my perspective, and whatever I might be imparting today, or teaching, or sharing, it's that you need to be able to talk about your work and to talk to other people. Period. Like sort of the beginning and end of this whole lecture, or this whole discussion. You need to talk about your work. Find a way. And this is a blog that I also do. It's a resource blog. This has rolling deadlines in here. Many are international. There's links here, and a lot of ongoing open calls that I filter to make things as as scam free as possible, because even when you're doing searches for open calls and resources, you'll find things that sound good, but then there's a fee for this, a fee for that. Sometimes it's okay to pay a fee, but often not. So here's two more good ones. Rivet, if you guys don't know this one already, and maybe you do, just to be sure you have it, I'll put this in the chat too. That's Rivet. This is a good one that that searches residencies, but see how now they have with funding, free, no costs, and with costs. That's addressing the scams indirectly, right? You want it with funding or free with no cost. I mean, I don't know who picks with cost, but maybe there's some things that are good that way. I mean, some of them are all right. And then this one, Res Artist, that maybe some of you know, for residencies. Let's see if it loads. Yeah, there we go. This is a great international network that's features residencies all over the world. Tasmania,
Solitude,
Colombia. What?
No, I just mentioned one that I know.
Oh, Solitude, great. Yeah. We can put it in the text too. So we can I'll get to questions, I think, right now, but the idea of international visibility is this. This is sort of like the thesis here, and then I think the questions will outline how I would approach this, how I would make this happen. From an American perspective, who interviews a lot of people from all over the world, so I'm privy to what I think are other perspectives, other ways of navigating the world. But the art world is this global thing, right? Biennials are global. The conversation is global. Residencies are global. So there is a common language, so to speak. Artists want to make sales of paintings, and dealers want to sell the paintings. Collectors want to collect them. So the art ecosystem is a word that I've been hearing a lot lately. Right. I interview a lot of collectors, and the art ecosystem is what they all talk about supporting, right? I want to support the ecosystem in this way. So what is the ecosystem? It's this: residencies, grants, nonprofit exhibitions, collectors, and commercial galleries. The rest is all nonprofit. Yeah. So this is the ecosystem that, as an artist or as a I know one person here is like the director, founder of a collective, of an artist-run or nonprofit. So that's part of the ecosystem, right? That's what I mean by nonprofits, artist-run, spaces to state-run spaces to museums, really. So without going into this too much, and people can ask more about all of these, which I could have really broken down how to get into all of these. But let's just say, for the sake of my argument, that this is what makes up the art ecosystem. And collectors, for example, are careful to contribute in the right way, as I understand it. They often create residencies because collectors like to build their collections, but also they want to, from what they tell me, they want to make friends with artists. They want to hang out with artists. That's kind of why they do what they do. They want to talk to artists. So they create parties, they create residencies. It's like bringing all the artists to your house. You all have a studio. We bring in a few curators. There's a methodology to it.
Yeah.
So then there's and the collectors can buy from the galleries, or they can buy from the galleries and give it to a museum, or both. But they're very conscious of the ecosystem, how all these things feed one another. And as an artist, you just need to try to do all those things, whether you're object-based or not, whether you want to make an income off your art or not, to be in the international conversation. Yeah. It would be these things. So,
yes.
I could jump into some of the questions. I have them right here.
I'll have, of course, some of the questions, but I don't know whether you prefer yours to go first. So.
Either way, no, you can tell me. No, these questions here are the ones that some of the ones you sent me that I'm reading off of. But yeah, no, if you have questions, you tell me, please, first, Dominic.
Well, I mean, there are few. I would say they're not necessarily only questions, because this is not about expecting that we will hear the kind of way or an idea how to solve it, but we can just talk it through, because there are many issues that I would say happen to be very important for the young artists studying in this part of the world, which is a kind of I would say it's a different ecosystem also regarding the reference between the connection between the collector and the gallery and the artist and all this, what you have described, and which is sort of pretty much of a standard for the New York or the American situation, also Western Europe. We kind of in Poland, we kind of in the middle of the system, but not necessarily we totally submerged with. So on one hand, you could say there are things that are pretty difficult about that, because it's very difficult to find a collector in Poland. It's also it's an also question of the approach to the actual activity, because whereas you start as a student or just out of the college to try to gain the recognition, it's a question how you make those links, but not necessarily on the base of collectors that are not existing in our country. We're dealing of a system which is much more sort of based on recognition, which is related to the public institutions and the non-for-profit places, which is happening in Poland. My question would be, as if I'm a young artist, whether that kind of international sort of task would be for me a waste of time, or would be for me something to really try to engage with, even on the basis of me, let's say, being based in Poznań or being based in a sort of remote place. So if I'm able to navigate with such connections, or whether I'm able to navigate in a situation which at the moment, of course, you could say on one hand we have a fantastic opportunity to, for example, invite people like you to our talks, which has not been possible, that wouldn't have been possible even a couple of years ago, to host you in Poznań, like virtually in Poznań. But on the other hand, I would say the situation makes for the young artists the task quite difficult, because with the amount of information that people who are somehow in power or in position to be able to notice the quality are in a position of the sort of overview vision, which is very much camouflaged, or whether the real quality is very often camouflaged by the quantity. So how to get through this the digital camouflage when you have so many artists getting involved with the self-promotion activity, to get through these connections that can really help you in a vital way, rather than be another kind of a spam, speaking of what you've sent and how it's being considered as an approach for particular people, for the particular situation, because this is the recognition that I gained from my younger colleagues, saying that they sent hundreds of letters and they try to communicate, but it all ends up in nothing, just because there is no personal contact. There's no chance to go and see the galleries, because the closest one would be in Berlin. And even as you would take a trip and go from Poznan to Berlin, you'll end up with this kind of a barrier of not having a gallery, whether I can approach the collector, if I even find him personally without such a support. I mean, all those relations, how is it possible to navigate in a contemporary reality, which on one hand gives you the incredible chance to communicate like we do, but on the other hand, it may be just an idea, maybe just a situation which not necessarily has any effect in the truth, on the true situation, which means that we spend a lot of time of doing all those gestures, but in fact, they end up with nothing.
Okay, that's a great question, and yeah, I'd like to address that directly. How you cannot do any of those gestures, which are often a waste of time. These gestures, which I interpret as you saying, students sending out many emails, letters to people, never getting any responses, finding a wall of silence out there, and exhausting resources, right? Your own energy. The way I would, and many of these questions are answered, which maybe we'll just talk when we can read this doc afterwards. In this kind of light, is that there is a specific way to do it, and the artist's impulse, likely, I mean, what I'd like to see is the contents of all your students' letters. What did they all say? And if it was more or less that they're sharing their work to see if somebody's interested, that's the problem initially. And that's usually what people do, right? Artists share their work because they want to see if someone is interested in this work, the collector, the curator, all these people that you want to get to. And that's exactly what turns them off, and as they all tell me. And so what they want instead, and they tell me this, is not like my theory, is they want genuine connection, intimate communication. So what does that mean? That means an intimate compliment, an intimate that shows you've researched them. Just recently, I was trying to reach the director, for example, of Creative, it's a major nonprofit here in New York, right? I interviewed her. I felt close to her. Felt like I had a connection. We've talked, but she doesn't answer emails about a project we're working on and following up. And I write politely, regularly, in a very straight way. But then when an article came out, that a magazine, the Brooklyn Rail, and she had curated some other writers from Creative Capital, which is a grant organization that she runs. I just wrote to her and I said, and she's been writing me letters back that say things like, I'm really busy. I don't have enough bandwidth right now. When I wrote her just about the article that came out, it was a letter that was compliments that said, I saw the Brooklyn Rail piece. I read the piece. The opening by you was great. I like the reference to this artist because I never realized that this happened to this. And then I said, the second piece that you curated wrote about the text by, the non-binary artist who uses ocean as a pronoun was interesting because of this, and this. And when I sent that to her, it was just a compliment. It was interesting what you curated, what you wrote. And she wrote back in no time to thank me. And I found this universal throughout the art world internationally, or anyway, it's sort of human nature. If we compliment first the people that we're trying to meet, we will get much farther than if we show them something first.
Yeah,
that would be the answer to how to communicate. Is to compliment, is to research who they are, the collector, the gallerist, and then compliment them. After enough compliments, everybody wants to know, who is this wonderful person complimenting me? So they'll ask, what do you do? You're an artist, you know. It's just, so that's what I hear and what I see. It's still about this ancient and old human connection. How do we build an intimate connection with someone who's engaged intellectually, emotionally, psychologically with us? So I could read from other questions, or you could ask me more, Dominic, however you want, however you think we should do this.
Well, that's a great answer. I'm just thinking about the idea of a demand now. If you have a certain type of whether, because it's like many artists at the young stage, of course, we all think we are brilliant, and all what we do is incredibly important, and very often it is for the general overview of the culture, which misses a lot, because the idea of the visibility, which I have also mentioned, is somehow related to the idea of a camouflage, that within the all amount of info, even when you contact the person on the specific subject, you still may be not filling the demandings and all the expectations of being the right person for their own use. And that's also something which we may be even asking or discussing later on, is that I have this feeling, I don't know what is your feeling at the moment within the art world in general, but the feeling that not necessarily art very often is at stake in terms of the arts, of the identity of the art, what it is in fact, and what quality it represents, but the identity of the artist itself, himself or herself. And this is a question also to the which is maybe a broader question about the perception of the art politics at the moment in the US, but also in Europe, is that we do not seek a quality art, but we seek art which is related to particular identity of an artist. Meaning he is, he is within a certain age or within a certain ethnical or sexual identity. Of course, it can be a support at the beginning that you represent certain type of sexual or ethnical identity, but the question is how to deal with that, because on the end it may turn out that your CV is just not what's behind your work, but who you in fact are. Meaning that, I was born in Poland and I'm heterosexual artist in 50s, white male, which may not necessarily provide me the best career pathway in the States at the moment. I think it's kind of a risky question, but that's how it is. So how can we deal with this situation, which on one hand, if we're lucky, we're being supported by that kind of needed exoticism or needed demand for such and such artists representing such and such ethnical background. But on the other hand, I don't really want personally that would be my CV. My CV is what I do rather than who I am, in fact, of my identity. Identity is something to work with rather than something to be put at the first point as my the quality of my art. So it's a kind of extended question, but I would like to hear your opinion about that, how to deal with that, and what are the obstacles, what are the what are the problems with that, or what are the maybe situations which can be helpful within when you promote your identity rather than your art?
Yeah, I would respond to that practically, and if it's okay, I would like, disagree with you on a number of things there. I mean, if you want to get into this, I have a pretty strong perspective on that, on what that means. The white male being shut out, and or perceiving to be. And so this is my take on it. The rise of social justice consciousness, and the importance of making an effort to recognize people of color, people of backgrounds that were previously marginalized, is as important as recognizing women. If we only looked at people's resumes, it was only about the art, then that's how we got museums full of men, full of white men, full of almost no women historically, who are amazing artists, and I'm sure full of other people of color historically who were amazing artists, because they had to be out there. We only got men in museums. This is our colonial history, right? This is where we are now. So the museums are all packed with that. Packed with it so much that we talk about white privilege because we can't even see outside it. It's like we're still kind of, everybody's analyzing everything in a kind of European colonial model. So the idea of white men being shut out on one hand, and a white man saying that, is, I think, it's not recognizing the privilege that you still maintain and is out there. For example, there may be more interest in women right now, and there may be more interest in minorities. But absolutely, as a white male, you still have entree anywhere. You can still make more people comfortable than uncomfortable. So students who are feeling victimized by a system that seems to be prioritizing marginalized communities are, in my opinion, showing off their privilege, because that's how things get balanced. That's how women got into museums. If we just kept saying it's all about the resume and all about the art, women would be getting nowhere. So I support all these new efforts to some degree, although it's so that's on one hand, right? And so that's the one hand. The other hand is yeah, sometimes it can go too far in that direction, right?
Because in fact, it was my question, because my question, I mean, I totally agree with what you just said. So it wasn't my question about representing certain position. I use it also as a kind of an example that would lead more to the question, which is more about promoting, and it is, I think this is very important for young artists, about concentrating on promoting your identity, whatever it is. Sometimes it's helpful, sometimes it's not, in terms of the hierarchy of your promotion, the way how you showcase your work, and what kind of part you put into the notion of identity in promotion your work. And that was my question, more than about the things and that you have been just talking about. It's about
yeah, but that's still about sex, isn't it? It's like, do you promote yourself as a man or a woman? How much does just your sex come into that? So if you're a man, it's kind of, that's the default. You don't have to promote your sex. You can promote the work. If you're a woman, it might be something to mention. Do you know what I mean? It's going to be perceived differently. So still, by just our names, how we use our names, tells whoever we're talking to, something about what's attractive, what's working, what's not. Whether you come to my studio as an artist that's a woman or a man, or you know, I'm going to have a different interaction with you.
Right.
I'm going to treat you differently,
Right.
you know, because of your sex. And that's not because I'm, I don't know, anything other than human. It's because this is how we respond to people. So I think you have to present yourself, right? You can't not present yourself. Although you can use different pronouns now. You can be non-binary. You can basically say, I don't want to present myself. I'm non-committal to anything. You know, so I that's the current climate we're in, and I think that's interesting. I think if I'm answering a question, I think the way to present yourself is through who you already are, which is, among other things, your sex, and that's unavoidable. You know, as a man, and especially a white man, you don't have to mention your sex or anything. It's assumed, you know, by your name and just your moves. As a woman, it would be a different story, or trans, or gay, or whatever else.
Because this leads me to another question. I mean, we just started this from that kind of provocative sort of question, which I initiated, is how do you see the idea of fulfilling the demand? Because we deal very often. I mean, this is of course maybe not as visible in the States, but I could say that also, but definitely in the country which is very much the cultural institutions are the museums and the non-for-profit galleries, but they have a certain type of politics. It's all institutions that do have.
Yeah, but you're talking about pronouns now, aren't you? I mean, the answer to that is in your email signature: he, him, his. You know, they, their, them. Or as I recently saw, you know, they / ocean / you know, lakes or something.
So my question is another provocative maybe question. How do we feel ourselves as an artist, trying to fulfill the demand, meaning that find yourself within a certain structure that is demanding certain type of work? If my work does not necessarily relate to any of those issues that are kind of guided by curatorial ideas of the program, this means that on the one hand, I may be an independent artist, but on the other hand, I do not fulfill the demands that would be highly valued and would invite me to all sorts of
right, but you don't want to make that kind of art. You know, this is my thought on that, because that is a provocative question too. So, I mean, you go to an art fair, let's say Art Basel, and to me, one answer to that is you don't see all work about social justice or current contemporary political or sexual politics issues. You see a lot of other work there. However, for example, the kind of work you do stands outside of time in a sense that way. I was reading book 6 of My Struggle by Karl Ove Knausgaard.
Yeah.
Interesting writer, right? And he makes this interesting point in there where he says he's written monographs of, I think, Anselm Kiefer and Monk, and fantastic writer, really extraordinary, I think. He said, look, if you take a piece of work, a piece of art, and it's about issues that relate to, he didn't use these words, but social justice, what's happening at the moment, the politics of the time. He said, and in 100 years, if you look at that art, you're going to have to research the history, both politically, socially, and norms and morals and ethics of that time.
Yes.
Otherwise, you can't understand the work. You will not be able to understand the work. He said, therefore, it's not timeless. This is not a timeless work of art. This is something that has to be researched, as opposed to, for example, a Da Vinci painting, or Monk, or you know, or Anselm Kiefer to a lesser extent, actually. But conceptual work also fits into that. You can look at, you know, Michael Heiser or plenty of artists 100 years from now, and that same work doesn't need to be recontextualized with a lot of writing in a museum to allow you to understand and move into that work, right? It's you can experience it and don't need to know the entire social. So I think there's that argument. I mean, I'm all for whatever is changing at the moment in terms of everybody's sexual identity, and that's I think that's interesting and powerful. But I think art that's related only to that, or if museums are interested in that, it's a folly, because that much of that work that needs to be explained and is so specific to the current climate perhaps won't stand the test of time, as they say.
Would you see this post-pandemic situation as opening up, or rather shrinking in terms of the opportunities for young artists to contact, to promote the work, or try to exist more internationally than just locally? How do you feel that? Is there a change at all, or are we witnessing?
Yeah, there is a change. The strange change that happened is in wealth, I think, with the pandemic. It seemed that the very rich people got enormously rich, like people who already had fortunes. So these are all the museums almost globally that have investments are tied to multimillionaires. All of those people made a fortune in the pandemic.
Yeah.
And I think it was, and so organizations that used to give out grants, certainly this is the case in the United States, but I've seen it in other countries, suddenly have, twice or 5 times the amount of money to give out now. Their resources just like went up like crazy. And like the dirty secret to that is their benefactors, their donors got ridiculously rich during the pandemic, because when the stock market crashed, they bought as much as they possibly could, and they became rich. That's what they were waiting for, is the stock market crash. So this is a late capital thing, but as cynical as that may sound, this is good for artists, because there's tons of money, much more money in the arena that was always buying art, which is all the people that go to Art Basel and really invest artists into these kind of powerful figures. So I think the pandemic has, of course, done all this Zoom stuff and these talks, and but I think in terms of money's relationship to the arts, the pandemic changed everything. The way collectors were buying in the pandemic more than ever, without galleries, without looking at the galleries, So I mean, galleries are back. I don't think they're going anywhere, but there was some boom years in buying art there in the pandemic, and that was without physical visits. So that's something to kind of contemplate, and that is a game changer. And our relationship to that kind of capital is ongoing, right? But we both want it and critique it.
Yes. Would you? I have but maybe later on I'll just give a lead to other people asking questions. I have two more questions, Brainerd.
Sure. I'm happy to keep talking this way. Yeah.
The one thing is that if this, what you've just mentioned, if this means that the capital is being recognized or is being doubled or tripled by the current situation, does it mean that it also relates to the people who value art in a general level, not on the basis of its quality, but on the basis of the price? Meaning that if I'm rich, I buy only expensive art. Do you know what I mean? It's like I buy only at the major galleries, and I want to buy the art, which does not mean that it has a quality, or it's somehow revolutionary, because there are many things that are being completely ignored at the moment that are invisible. I just buy as a monstrous doubled by the pandemia in my finances, a collector. I just want to buy like an expensive Rolex, or something which has the price. Because if something doesn't have a price, which means very much that young artists, they start from a very low level of the prices, it's not interest for me anymore. I do not risk. That's a good question. It's good. A risk. I do not take risk in buying
Well, there's different collectors. My answer to that is there's different collectors. I interview collectors almost every week now. It's been a focus lately. Young collectors from all over the world, and most of them are actually talking about their enjoyment of buying art and building their collection and enjoying meeting artists. But the people maybe I'm talking about, the top like 1% that have this tremendous amount of money. Yeah, you're right. Though that section is only buying art to basically hide their money, to launder money. So they're not buying because they love something. They're not buying because they want to support the artist. They're buying because it's a Jasper Johns or whoever it is, and there's no question that it will hold its value, and I want to hide my money there, which is basically what they do. And so that's a very different collector group and a rarefied one than all the collectors out there that I've been interviewing that are kind and sincere, and they're learning about art and they're learning to understand artists, and they're building a collection based on their own interests and themes, which could be anything from current political things to something else, from a geographic area or something like that. But I see there's a lot of different types of collectors. But yeah, to speak just to that one that made an enormous amount of money, most of them, unless they're building residencies, are buying secondary market work. So it almost doesn't apply.
Yeah. But
that is the biggest part of the market that everyone's always reporting about, right? Is the secondary market. When we hear there was billions in art sales, that's secondary market. That's not artists everywhere that are making art, or galleries everywhere. That's art that's $500,000 each.
So what you're suggesting maybe for young artists is to link up with the young collectors.
Absolutely, they literally want to be their friends. They're in the young collectors that are in their like 30s. So if you're in your 20s, you're close to their age too. They're all over the world. You can, if you want to get a direct line to it, you could subscribe to Larry's List. I mean, I also have an online platform you can subscribe to, but Larry's List is something galleries use. They just put it in there. Larry's List is, it's not mine. It has nothing to do with me. It's $600 a year, and it's a listing of collectors worldwide. Often interviews with them, their Instagram handles, and it tells you what they collect and what they do. A lot of the people I interview are from that list.
Right.
And these are all young collectors. You could read through the list. When you first buy it, let's say for $5.95, which I did, they give you a report of, I don't know, 100 collectors, and they're literally profiles of all these people. So it's for galleries who are trying to do the same thing like you're asking, Dominic, right? Galleries are always thinking, where can we find more collectors? How can we get our artists visible? Because there's a million startup galleries everywhere thinking they have the new thing. But how do they really get visibility? How do they get the right collectors to them? It's Larry's List. You can see right in there, lots of young collectors, very young, early 30s.
If you start your career, I don't know if it's very much of a true, but I have this feeling that at the moment it's like you start your career, it's where you end your career, meaning that the fluidity between the galleries that are rising galleries and the galleries that are already established, that can somehow also establish your name in a more substantial way. I don't know. I had this before pandemic. Now maybe it's changing. I had this feeling that this fluidity happens to be more difficult. I mean, I would imagine a couple of decades ago, you could start showing with the gallery, which was a young gallery and not really established, and then basically you can rise up, connect with another gallery, be discovered, and then go into another gallery even more established and somehow build up your career. Now I have this feeling that as long as you do not start from the established gallery already, who will coin your career, you end up on the same level, which is also related to the price range of your works. So you will basically, this idea is to move upwards. I had this feeling it's much more, at least what I felt about Europe. I don't know how does it look in the States. It's much more kind of difficult because you seem to be linked with one people, one place, and it's a kind of a lifetime marriage, which does not allow you to go any higher or get a bigger recognition because you didn't start from the established gallery. So there is this kind of caste system which does not allow really for such a fluidity which used to be more common in the past decades. I don't know if it's just an impression, but if you could say maybe a few things about that, because I think it's important for the people who want to start, whether they should just look for the place that is any place for recognition, or they should really go already or try to approach people that will provide them the already instant recognition of a completely different, higher standard.
I think that's a great question. I think what you first said really is still the case, which is that there's always galleries starting all the time. The best method is what you just said, the first one. Enter into the gallery, you know, go find a young gallery that's just beginning, become one of their first artists, and hope to rise up with them. Because once you're trying to get into an established gallery that has already 20 artists or more, you're not going to have a show for a long time, especially a solo show. A young gallery, that model still exists, you know, to begin with them very early, and then build a relationship and move up through them. That's what I would say. Can I answer a question here? Someone Rita just asked a question. She said, you know, what do I think of the place of performance art or performative artistic actions in the art market? You know, that's a great question. For example, when you said that, I was trying to find the artist that I interviewed on that, and I can't right now, but he was an artist that was from the Netherlands, and he was a performance artist and was doing interactive things. And what he did was he applied to residencies. He lived a kind of nomadic life, right? Put all his books in PDFs and you know, or online, and kind of traveled. And he went from residency to residency, which you can do, or you can be getting in one residency. You can do that now if you're not tethered to something. It'll give you, in often cases, enough money to get by, where you could make money doing a little something else. But he was really a performance artist, and he would, wherever he went, he would travel, and he'd go to each museum, and he'd address museums directly, walk in there and say, I want to propose a project that's a performance, that's an interaction. There'll be a DJ here. We're going to record ambient sound. This is going to be part of the museum architecture. He had a nice proposal, and so, you know, he was navigating the nonprofit world, having museum shows everywhere, just with performative actions. And what did he sell? Most of the people sell either documentation, or if you're as savvy as somebody like Tino Sehgal, you're selling rights to reenact your performance. I mean, Tino Sehgal really broke the mold on that. Yeah. No performance artist has been able to make much use of the market, but he has. He's able to sell an action like two people kissing, you know, in a kind of lip lock, making out on the floor was one performance. You know, and the actors are switched out every 2 hours. It was an idea. It's idea-based, right? He sold that work to a museum. Museums loan that work. I mean, so there's a lot of levels that you could do with that. And so I asked more questions here. And Nara also asked, how do I know if my artwork is good enough to sell? You know, I was thinking, there's the question before of like, it's a good question. How is your art good enough? You know, are you good enough? You know, because part of what some collectors say is, when I ask, how do you reach artists? Do artists reach you? And some of them say, people send me a lot of terrible art. You know, I see a lot of really bad art. I don't know how to respond, so I don't respond. Excuse me. So, you know, the question is your art good? Is it good enough? Or is it bad art? You know, are you not a good artist? I mean, isn't this a valid question? It's, I think it is. And it's a really tricky one, right? Because if someone was to say, you know what, yeah, your art isn't very good, you should probably do something else. Historically, we know that they may or may not be right. You know, it's you know, maybe it's a combination of things, but you know, universities used to do that. Conservatories used to tell musicians, actors who were doing everything perfectly in terms of their craft, you don't have what it takes. Don't go into this industry. They would tell dancers that. They would definitely tell actors that at the school I went to, that was a state school, SUNY Purchase in New York. They would tell actors, you may be getting straight A's, but you don't have it to you know, to make it in this field. So, you know, you're kicked out of the program in the second year. I mean, like, wow, right? That's one view of art. It's changed for a lot of reasons to everybody's got a chance. But we also know everybody doesn't have a chance, right? There's some art maybe that is really bad, whatever that means. So how do you know if your work's good enough to sell? It's kind of an existential question. You don't really know. You have to believe in it with, you know, you have to believe in it. And on some level you do know, don't you? You make art, it's like having a baby, you know if your kid's crying all the time or not. You know if your kid is you know what's happening. I think all artists seem to be able to recognize good and bad art out in the world. Whatever level you're at in your career, you feel like you can say that's good, that's not good. So this relates to our own self-worth, right, which is such a complex issue, you know. So I hope that helps you, Nara. I know that's a difficult question, but there isn't a simple answer to that, other than you have to believe in it. You know, I mean, the classic example is Van Gogh, of course. How does he know if his art's good enough to sell? He doesn't. He never did. He never will. I mean, he sold some things, but you know, plenty of artists are like that, right? All the artists that have historically made it after their death, how did they know their art was good enough to sell? Apparently, they never did. Ever, because it never sold, or rarely. So how did they maintain their like delusion, right? I mean, there's just scores of masters we can say this about, right? How did they maintain the illusion, the delusion that their work was valuable when clearly the world was telling them they had no interest in it? Nobody had any interest in it. You're on the wrong path altogether, you know.
Great. So there's this term of confidence that is important. As long as you are, whatever you do, there is this element of confidence. If you are confident enough, you somehow project your confidence onto the people who you show your work to. Would you agree that this is really crucial? The confidence, whatever.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I'd like to. I think so. And in answering that, can I pass the mic to somebody who just was about to speak?
Yes, I have a question, but I also wanted to refer to the previous, actually, a few questions ago, about the position of the white male in the art world and the fact that this position is shifting somewhat, and it's and hallelujah to that, actually. But I guess this is also a problem which I've been also thinking about this. What is because there's the relation to the presence of the people who are called the minorities, but actually very often they're not the minority, not like quantity-wise. If we talk about people of color or women or parents and so on. But I think this is a matter which is gonna like solve itself in the next 20, 30, probably 50, rather 50 years. Because if we are changing a situation which has been solid for so long, there has to be this moment of transition, and it's going to be a weird one. But I don't think we have to worry about the quality of the work, because that's going to be verified by time. I mean, history will verify it, or her story, or their story, whatever. But I think this is something which is we're gonna be fine. But my question is also about not maybe inequality, but how does the art world, what is the approach towards older people? Because I think ageism is also an issue. I mean, the art world kind of reeks of it. I mean, actually not only art world. I think it's also music. Like we all love the young bloods and young people. And if you're past 35, you're kind of screwed if you haven't, achieved whatever you wanted to achieve. And I know that there's a lot of examples, Louis Bourgeois, or like we could multiply them, who did it like in the 60s or noticed because they were actually doing it for like their whole life. And like you mentioned, we don't really know if the art is good or not, but somehow you do it anyways because this is what you do. But what is the like? Because I don't usually when the galleries I follow or observe, they have like a new artist that they represent. They're usually pretty young. I don't think I've ever seen anybody adding an artist to their gallery who is 60 or 50 or 70 or what's with that? Do I have not enough data, or my observations are faulty, or is that really the case?
No, I think you're right on. I think I wouldn't disagree with anything there. I think there's ageism in the art world, there's ageism in the world, right? We're not allowed to age. Aging is bad. Aging is to be avoided. Aging is death, right? Nobody wants to see it, hear it. So I think, it's like, fuck yeah, this is the case, right? And that's painful and difficult. However, this idea of, and collectors and lots of people that I've interviewed have echoed what you're saying. Gallerists, oh, we like to meet young artists, and it always sounds like they're being ageist in almost all the interviews, right? And so I say to them something like, why the young artists? Well, and if they're being honest, they say something like, they're not cynical. They seem really ideal and open. Those are all things that you might lose as you age, right? So, ouch, right? So it's a matter, I think, also of those kind of things, right? There is just our physical age, our years that we can't avoid or change or manage, no matter how much money you have. But what we talk about and what we're enthusiastic about reduces our years, reduces and changes that point of view towards ageism. I mean, even just yesterday, my wife and I were at an opening, and I'm kind of an optimist, right? This sort of American optimist. My wife's from Spain, though, and native Spain, and she's also very optimistic and kind of up. And we're talking to other artists at this opening, and she was saying, the artist kept saying to her, oh, but you're so young or something like that. And she thought, for one, maybe they're trying to compliment me, but I'm not so young. But they were basically trying to say the only reason you're being positive is because, you're young. So, I mean, that's a kind of a weird anecdote, but I'm basically saying the way people read age is also through how jaded you are. Try to stay enthusiastic. I don't know if that helps, but because it's really difficult and painful what you're saying. Young people are getting more of a break. Beautiful people get more of a break, right? I mean, this is like, Jesus, what human nature is. But we also know the opposite to be true. And if, like all the artists who never made it till death or whatever, they really played the long game, they there was a lot more than ageism working against them. It was like wrong eraism, right? Like they were making art in the wrong time of the world, So I think all those things are, those are the slings and arrows. Like we have to endure them, unfortunately, and it gets worse, And maybe we'll get the Louise Bourgeois or the this, but there's always that person who's exactly like you, only 20 years younger, and they're getting all this attention, and that ignites all that insecurity. But yeah, his history tells us that you have to play the long game, nevertheless, right? Somehow, or not make art at all. If that helps. I mean, ask something else if that didn't help, but feel free to unmic or ask anything else, or That's good. These are
Does
good
not.
questions. These are all provocative issues, right? To really get into ageism or to really get into the problems with the market or capitalism is interesting, Dominic and Nara and everyone that's asking questions. Rita.
Do you think it is an illusion in terms of this idea that maybe the long-term strategy is not valid anymore? Because what I think is that we also so much like socially at the moment attached to being to not to be late, to be on time. So would you consider this to be like the rule that will eradicate all people who would try to play the long-term game despite the times? Or do you think that they may be eventually right, that despite not being recognized, still the long-term strategy or long-term game may eventually pay off? Or do you think within the actual social media kind of information mess that we all in, this is not an issue anymore, and basically it's not a question anymore to play that game?
Yeah, that's very interesting. Well, I think it is a question to play that game, but it's what does payoff mean? I mean, if you think of the long game the way a poet sees it, for example, right? I got a degree in poetry. Let's say I got an MFA in poetry, a master, I get a PhD in poetry, but at least you get a master's in poetry. I go out into the world. I want to publish my poems.
Yeah.
I see myself as a poet, I don't write prose, not a teacher. So I publish them in different magazines. Yeah. What is my hope for the future? My hope for the future, even if I publish a book of poetry and I'm a national poet, I'm never going to make a living off of that. Even if I reach the highest ranks of being a poet, I am likely never, ever going to make a living off it, because nobody's really buying poetry. I mean, they're just not, right? And I read a lot of poetry. So think of the long-term outlook for a poet. That's really a kind of humble game, right? They're honing their craft. They're trying to do something contemporary, expressive, experimental, new, their own voice, their own this, you know, and yet there's basically no chance for financial remuneration ever, even in the greatest scenario. So they're really just making it for recognition, international recognition. They want to. In this magazine here, that magazine there, maybe that works them up to a better magazine in a better situation in Europe, in this country. So if you compare the artist's trajectory to that game, the long game often is completely successful without even having any sales. I'm a poet, and I've showed in all kinds of publications, Granta, this, that. You're a success among your peers. I think the same thing could apply to the art world. Completely. Yeah. There are plenty of artists that navigate the art world that way. I mean, at the same time, because we're in this world that's under the boot of capitalism, we're always thinking it would be nice to have all the money that other artists had. I remember talking to one artist at a gallery who was telling me, who was more into doing performance and other things and raising money, and was in the Venice Biennial himself, really always out of money, and now he's really actually out of money almost. And this guy would say, he said, it's hard. He said, when I'm at the gallery and I see that they're showing my work, which doesn't sell because my work's more about the experience, and these derivative objects aren't really what everybody wants, although we sell some. But he said, not like the guy next to me selling a painting for $100,000. He said, and I can't say I'm not jealous. I think I worked at least as hard as him. And he just sold that. So the art world brings in this weird element, unlike poets. Poets, may be jealous of each other and are, but it's not like, wow, that guy just sold his poem for $100,000. But it's the same game, I think.
I don't want to sound like an idealist, but I think the question is also, if somebody told you here and now, you will never be acknowledged or successful in terms of money, would you carry on doing your work? And if the answer is yes, then you're in the right place. And if the answer is no, I think that's the case. Or
I agree. No, I agree. I agree. It's like that question asked of the poet would be almost meaningless, right? The poet would say, "Of course, I'm a poet. I have to keep writing poems. Doesn't matter if
That's
nobody
the
buys them."
to Naira here, because yeah, I mean, this is a tough question you asked there, but I think if you change the question a little bit, and what if it isn't? What if my art isn't good enough to sell? Are you going to carry on doing it? And I think, maybe you like risk, but if you're not a fan of it, I guess like it's a matter of just deciding to whether you want to do it or not, regardless of the outcome in terms of
Well, it's what purpose the art's serving for you too, right? I mean, a poem has to be read. It's not that you can just make the poem and be satisfied if no one ever reads it, likely, right? Just like an artist, I think, can't make art and never have it exhibited, So whether the question aside of whether it's good or not, it's also whether it's exhibited or not,
or whether
I think, right? Or no?
Well, this is another thing, because you can also produce a lot of work and not show it. Or also, there's like poetry, you have to read it, or a book has to be read. Like a painting, you can glance at it and it's seen, or is it? Like, time-wise, the way you deal with painting, or like with a video piece, which is, let's say, 30 minutes long, and then who's going to watch that, So, I think you have to be crazy to do art, unless you just really have to do it. And then you don't have to worry whether the success will come or not, because if it does, it's like, this kind of side effect, which just happens.
No, I agree. I think you do have to be, maybe crazy isn't the right word. I would say delusional, because you have to have an entire delusion about the value of what you're doing. Yeah. Every artist has had that, in history, who we still remember, right? They've had the sense that what they're doing is important when others didn't think so, which is such a fascinating idea. Like, who else can say that, besides an artist? You can't say, I've been a civil servant for 20 years and my work's going to be remembered as much more important than people think it is. It won't be, But artists can have that delusion, and it's real often, depending on what happened in their careers or after their death, right?
I think it's,
so that's real, right? Yeah.
I think it's a really excellent term, this delusional idea, or the way how we place our priority, because what I was going to ask you is actually about the time management. The time management, which is a problem for all of us, because we cannot stretch the time. We can only commit certain amount of time to certain type of activities. And to quote a friend of mine, Peter Rostovsky from New York, who is an interesting painter, he's got this. I remember we met together at Alan Harvey's place, and he said he's got this idea about the triple biters, or kind of vampiric idea of art world, which means that we can imagine this situation that you're younger. I mean, it may be all cliche, it may be all too simplistic, but I just want to again be a little bit provocative. So imagine you're a young artist and you start your career, and then, well, wow, there is a show, an exhibition, and then basically you sell your work, but then you need to spend a certain amount of time on promoting your work, which of course takes the same amount of time from your activity in making art. So you're sort of a single biter. Then after a while, you realize that almost half of the activity that you do is a promotional machine, and you can only afford on half of the time to just make your art, because all the rest is promotion. And then you double biter, and then on the third step, it's like that mostly all of the time that you actually spend is on the promoting of your work rather than doing anything. So then you triple biter, and knowing the story of the Dracula of Bram Stoker, the only person who was somehow permeable onto being bitten is a crazy Van Helsing. He had this kind of different rationale of what's important, what's really his own rational move in terms of the time management to actually do things that the other people would say, no, you have to concentrate on promoting yourself rather than doing art.
Yeah, I think
where's the right balance with this? Where is the because that's what I'm asking.
Well, I mean, without answering that directly, the balance is as much art as possible and as little of any of that other stuff as possible. Yeah. Ideally, none, right? Yeah. So what's the minimum, right? What's the minimum to do in terms of the business, the networking? The minimum to do is to, you know, actually speak with people and make a new relationship. I mean, all media and everything aside, it's to be standing in front of somebody and building a relationship.
Right.
That's meaningful. I think the rest, you know, either, you know, there's all these systems of time management, calendars, reminders, all this stuff, or there's also hiring people. There's virtual assistants all over the world now through something like Upwork. You can hire people to find and organize grant applications, other applications. If there's all this stuff you don't like to do, the way I always think about it anyway is, can I work with somebody or hire somebody to get me around this fact that I don't have enough time? And on a freelance site like Upwork, if you want to post more on social media, I mean, I personally don't post anything on social media myself. I'm not that interested. I share other things and I have someone else post them. So I think one way out of that is to not do it yourself. Spend your time on what's most important, which is making art or writing or whatever, and as little time as possible on everything else. Reduce it to a minimum, which has to at least be building a relationship on a regular basis, or to really get everything done. Begin hiring people for 1 hour a week. You know, it doesn't have to be a lot, but it's an investment in your medium.
Wonderful. That's a great answer. Thank you.
Sure.
I have another question. This has to do with the ethical aspect of museums expecting you, which is very obvious, and I think it's corrupted in the Western art world, which is driven by existing art market. Meaning that you have a museum which is basically offering you a substantial promotion, but they expect you to do your work for free, because what they offer you is a promotion, and that takes place in the places like Berlin, in Germany. And I would say that fortunately enough, if there could be some advantages of the places like Poland, when you do not literally have an art market, is that artists have maybe more substantial right to expect the fee from the museum for his show, unless it's very often abused by the museum, because they say, look, you're a young artist, so you have to do it for free because of your promotion. So you do it for free for your promotion, and then when you're old artists, they also play the same game, saying, look, you need to be remembered somehow, so or the kind of re-remembered, so then you also should do it for free for your promotion. But this exists without luckily enough, without the art market. So I think in Poland there is much more of an expectancy that artists should get paid for his work for the museum and public institutions. What my feeling is from the institutions that are established that I work with in Berlin or in other places in Europe, is that they never expect, or they never even think of, that you should get paid for your work. And I think it's
yeah, that's yeah, of course, that's an injustice that is changing. I think in Canada now, that's no longer the issue, because there's a law that was passed in Canada to prevent that, because yeah, there was a protest and it was organized, and they ruled that a museum can't ask artists to basically fill it up and draw, so they can draw, you know, visitors in that are paying to be in the museum, and not compensate the artists. Artists must be compensated. So in Canada, that law has literally changed. because otherwise it's pretty irritating. Yeah, that happened to me at the Whitney Biennial. I knew other people there. It was Erwin Reddle at the Biennial. He was doing they asked him to do a curtain of lights, in front of the Whitney Biennial, and these were little LED lights that looked really cool, right? The 2 stories of lights, but it would cost him something like $15,000 to build, and they said, we'll give you 1,000 or something, and he had to raise the rest of the money. So yeah, I think that is a practice that's unfair, and they're banking on their yeah, there's a lot of unfair museum practices, and they're, but that, yeah, unfortunately it's so unregulated, and some of that is changing by law, like in Canada, because you're right, that's unfair and it should be changed, and it is in some parts of the world.
But you suggest the young artists should really make their point, meaning that they should be, I would expect, be more direct in their expectations, saying like, look, it's an ethical question, because if I'm young and I'm being, I mean, those approaches, they also go to me. So I think it's as ethical also from my point of view, that if I say like,
oh yeah, well, just ask for more money. Just ask for more money. Do you have to ask for the money is the thing. My first experience that was with because it's amazing how they won't offer artists money because of what you're talking about, and they're kind of miserly with it. I was at there's a museum called the Museo El Barrio on Fifth Avenue in New York, a good museum, small museum, and having a show there, and they said, we want you to do like an educational piece, which was which meant I would do an inflatable, and there would be turntables in there that people could play with. Right, it was a little installation, but a temporary one. You said, and we have artist fees for that. I said, well, because usually the educational part of museums actually has fees if you're doing a workshop or an event. So I said, well, how much do you pay? And she said, well, it depends what you need. She said, and I said, well, what did other people ask? I mean, I was pretty naive then. She said, well, Nicholas asked for $100 and he needed $50. I said, okay. I came back the next day and I said, I'd like $800. And they said, no, the most we have is 500. I said, okay, I'll take that. And then I realized that with every museum, it was like that. If you say, they'll say, what do you need? Maybe you want this. Even when I had a show a little later, I did a much more sophisticated version of this at the Whitney Museum after the biennial. We did a small show not a small show, it was a solo show at one of their branches, and they were always talking about budget, and we were talking about it, and they kept saying we don't really have a budget. And so then I brought in a budget that was like $1.5 million, and of course they were like, and then, but there was different circles, and one of the circles was $22,000, and I said, so we're wondering like how much of this portion of it you can fund. We'll fundraise the rest. And we couldn't fundraise that much, but it was just, and they said, oh, the most we could give is 5,000 here. And the other person who was sitting at the table said, well, we could give you 5,000. And so, it's like, if you ask for the moon, you'll see what their limits are right away, because there is a limit there. They just, like to give a little here, a little there. But if you say, I need a lot, I don't know, the American phrase is, the squeaky wheel gets the oil. If you say, I want that, they'll either give it to you or they'll say what their limit is for giving to artists. Like both those situations that I was in, they both told us, oh, what the most we could give is 5,000 or the most 500. Okay, then their budget, because they're not going to tell you beforehand.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I think for me, all of this, I'm reading this book now that I'm also influenced by, My Struggle by Karl Ove Knausgaard. And, it's like all of these things are about getting yourself out into the world, and everybody's very especially artists, we're all shy or introverts or want to be introverts. You want to be alone in your studio working, not talking to people and trying to present yourself and all of that. And all while aging every year, but it's an unfortunate but necessary you know, though uncomfortable, necessity, right? We have to do it, and some do it better than others, but it's a necessity that I think is natural, and so human nature. If human nature is like that, we're all sort of shy. We're all sort of, you know, hesitant. What makes things smoother, and to me, that's the theme of this talk or whatever, is to compliment other people. You know?
Yeah.
I mean, it just takes you everywhere. You could try it today. Anybody listening to this recording or live presentation, write one letter to one curator or one person that you admire that you think would never write back to you, and just give them a detailed compliment and write a few paragraphs and get into it and make it real. You'd be very surprised if you didn't get a quick answer. You know, it's just sending out love into the world, right? To be a little, you know, it's about that. Everybody wants to be seen and heard, right? This is the case in loving relationships. We want to be seen and heard, right? And if we're not, everything gets fucked up, right? Or if the other person isn't, everything gets fucked up. So, you know, I think generally it's like that. So all the people you want to meet, all the connections you want, just reach out to them and give them love, and they will respond like that. The most powerful people tend to respond incredibly fast to a real compliment because they just don't get them in the art world, no matter how powerful you are. You just don't. You could write to Hans Ulrich Obrist or whoever you think is at the top of the pile, and you know, a good detailed compliment will get a reply. Will always be forwarded to them if it's not even their direct email. Love is the answer. Is what I'm trying to say to wrap this up in a kind of American, I am an optimist way. I think that's a universal, though, right? That's a universal, and you know.
Maybe, I mean, going on this line of love and mutual relationship and work, I would like to ask you also about your idea of cooperation, because you have been working with your wife. You established a team. You got involved with many fantastic projects, working as a team. We have also in our group people who just started independent. They're artists like Krzysztof Mentel. I don't know, Krzysztof, if you're with us. My question would be, what possibly would be your also advices or kind of simple suggestions how to, when you establish place which is one room and it's a one gallery and it's in Poznań, okay, but it doesn't mean that it may not turn to be international at a certain point because of the contact with the people that you can, as you just said, built on the basis of the relation and on the understanding and admiring also the other people's work. So I think it could be maybe good if you could say a few words about that, because it can be also interesting for some of the artists here who are also involved with building up not only their own careers but also making the independent art spaces and building up the very interesting events on the basis of collaboration.
Yeah, great question, and whole realm for artists who have created artist-run spaces or are involved in artist-run spaces or collectives, or it could just be like your apartment, one room. The thing you can do with that to collaborate globally, and this happens all the time. I've interviewed people who suddenly just like are booming in the art world just with this one idea. And what it is, and these are people who aren't even necessarily artists or more naive. They have a degree in history or they want to curate. So you have a small space. It doesn't matter how small it is, from a room in your apartment. You establish it as a, whatever you want to call it, an artist collective or a residency or however you want to phrase it. Then you can reach out to all other residencies in the world from recently, a woman was talking to me about this from Syria, I don't know, Beirut, all these places, everywhere, other residencies who are also getting public funds, are interested in doing exchanges, collaborations, right? So, and it doesn't matter where you are in the world, everybody's interested in that kind of like cross-border exchange now. So and a matter of fact, it's great that you're reaching out to collaborators who are in other parts of the world because they don't know anybody right in your city or your country. And so that makes it all the more, especially if there isn't a large art presence in your city or your country. And a lot of times those things are focused around the collaborations. The global collaborations tend to be focused around residency type things, which is simple enough. Someone can sleep on your couch for a week. I mean, it's just like that, and you're getting public funds for this. And then it can grow, obviously. And you can have a program, and the program would be something like, when people come to our residency, which is just one bed on the floor in that room, but you don't present it like that, or 2 beds on the floor, 5 or 10. They interact with the local community. We develop a project based on their work that somehow has to do with the local culture here. And let's say you're in a farming community, it would engage that farming community. That's very cool in the art world now. That seems very, to bring art to places that's not a city. So you're collaborating with other centers, other artist collectives that are that may be in different parts of the world, and the more remote or odd yours is, and if you make your program about, and I'm sorry to say, like, you don't have to do this, it's just one idea, but you make your program about local community. It's what most residencies have some program in. It would likely be successful because then you're getting recognized on the state level. Suddenly local media and other people are noticing, oh, wow, they engaged the community with this art project. And this art project was actually part of an exchange between them and Ljubljana. And then there was, then you could apply for grants and public funds. If that's helpful. Yeah, it's a great thing to do. It's a great way to get right into the international art scene as an artist, to immediately get that language. And then you're also hosting other artists that are cool to talk to. And again, it could be as minimal as they're sleeping on a cot on your floor, and or something like that. Yeah, any other questions? You guys could put it in the chat there too. It's good. It's good talking about all of these things. I think they're important.
I don't know. I don't know if anybody would like to share a screen, maybe show. I don't know if Christoph or somebody else, or could. I don't know. It's really open, but we have a fantastic opportunity now to maybe discuss some of it.
Yeah, the thing was, this was sort of a dicey part of it, but if someone wants to share one image and let's just talk a little bit about it, or anything you want. Just what's the image and what are you doing, or whatever, yeah. Or not. You got. If anybody hasn't read that book, you should. The Karl Ove Knausgaard series, My Struggle, because it's about being, like, it's all about his excruciating life as being a painfully shy person and an internationally recognized author. And it's done, and basically he's giving away all his secrets. It's an autobiographical novel. He's naming everybody in his family. The events are real. It's upsetting and really intimate, and in the end makes you feel like, like globally the effect is people feel they identify with him. They identify with a shy person who's getting humiliated on a regular basis in all kinds of minor ways through interactions throughout the day. It's fascinating, really.
Could you repeat his name and the title of the book?
The title of the book is My Struggle.
Great. Thank you.
And Norwegian author, Knausgaard, Knausgaard, yeah, remarkable piece of writing. I think it's like the like the Proust of our moment. That kind of writer. You know, those 6 books are 3,500 pages. It's just like, you know, crazy. But the writing is well, I don't want to sound like a cult fan of the book, but I think I am. But it points to just an interesting issue that artists have in common. Also, is why I brought it up. The idea of hesitating to do extroverted things that are social in nature, you know, and also how even that might, like at this point in the last novel that I'm in, he's talking about doing readings about the novel, right? He's become well known. His publisher wants him to give conversations about the novel. I mean, interviews and, you know, and he says, you know, every time I do a reading, or I do an interview, he said, aren't I betraying the novel? Isn't it the job of the novel to do that? Why am I talking about it? Why are people asking questions? I'm undermining my art. I'm making it seem as though it has to be explained. And even if I know it doesn't, my publisher wants me to talk to these people. I have to say something. And in the end, I'm betraying my best interests. I mean, that's like a theme for him. He's always like betraying everything, but so powerful, right? For artists, I think is talking too much about it or presenting yourself, betraying the art itself. That's problematic and existential.
What is your feeling about? It's not necessarily now the artist run spaces related question, but more about the artist collaboration in making work of art. What are your feelings about that? How it can be successful, and also in terms of like this first moment when you start doing something and you have artists who make groups, or they work as a duo, like in your case, as a sort of the couples. What is your feeling about, and how would you place this idea of the artist cooperation and actually the creative act?
Yeah, that's a good point. Collaboration is interesting because, you know, for me anyway, you have to release a certain amount of control and let go a certain amount of ego, right? I mean, I'm just learning as I get older. But in the last relationship I had, also with an artist, I was getting the lion's share of attention, you know, and that's partly because I'm a man and I'm white and I'm a talker, and she wasn't, right? So that's an imbalance that's kind of can create some serious dysfunction in a relationship or a you know, marriage or whatever. We weren't married. My wife now, I mean, one of the things I did when we met was we created this collaborative. And I put her name first too, you know, because I mean, certainly as a man, as a white man, there's all these other issues like, you know, I think somehow it's about me to some extent, right? Because I talk, you know. But to put her name first was conscious, because otherwise I would have put mine first, and it also, you know, it doesn't take you down a notch, but it makes you have to let go of something that can often get in the way in artistic process, which is your self-inflated sense of yourself, you know, right? Like what's really, you know, and even you're running a nonprofit, you have a group of people. Instead of you being like the dictator of what happens in this place, if a group of people are deciding, some more interesting things can happen, and you get out of your own, you know, your own ideas, which I think is important. But for also, I mean, so speaking personally, also there's that. Just, you know, in terms of process, more fresh air comes in. In terms of a relationship, it's hard to live with an artist. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't know what everybody else's experience is, but the egos, one person's successful, the other person isn't. You got that show, I applied to, why didn't I get it? Oh, because you were having coffee with that person. You know, it's like, yeah, it's a nightmare. You know? So I think collaboration helps relationships stay together, you know, thrive. Yeah, but I think they're wonderful. They get you out of yourself. I mean, the latest thing, of course, in residencies everywhere is working with scientists, working with people in other fields. And that's so cool because you really get the perspective on your art as something that's not just art. It's like a scientist doesn't quite understand why you're collaborating with him or her. And maybe you don't quite understand why you're collaborating with a scientist. And that's a very interesting dynamic, too. It really just expands your practice, I think, or can.
What you just said, I think it also involves the important aspect of admitting who you're capable of, what you are capable of. Because I know many unsuccessful cooperations between art and science just because artists seem to not to suddenly want to turn themselves into the scientists. I think very often the cooperation may really the clue for the cooperation may rely on what I'm not capable of, and I have to admit this, what I'm stupid of, or what I'm not basically, you know, what is my role in the whole project, not to turn ourselves into somebody else who is really not like us, because he's scientist and it's a different type of vocabulary, different type of perception, different type of references. So I think what you were just saying is also this question of put yourself down, put yourself a little bit on the second stage by admitting that, well, I'm just a simple painter. Okay, I can paint the surface pretty well, but what I can do is just to stick on the surface rather than try to suddenly turn myself into somebody who is credible in terms of his scientific curriculum, which somehow happens in terms of artists who suddenly have these ambitions to become somebody else. That's this thing which, of course, as you have mentioned, the art is the scene which you can basically, which can somehow sort of be informed by many other areas of the activity. But the question is to know where are your limits, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Or maybe like make use of the limits you have, because if you collaborate with people like scientists or people from a totally different branch that you have no idea about what they're doing, then you can allow yourself to, maybe you can allow yourself for this, it's not ignorance, it's just lack of knowledge, which allows you to come up with ideas they would not dare to, because, you know, they have these certain limitations. Like we know also how not to paint. And then we have to reteach ourselves, like paint as an example, like we have to try to forget everything we've been taught in order to get anywhere. So I think that's interesting when you enter a territory which is unknown to you, because you have the gut to think outside the box without even knowing that this is a gutty thing to do, because you just have no clue. And then you have this courage, which is just, you know, maybe imagination. But I think this could be interesting, exactly not knowing, but also just, you know, collaborating anyways. And it's not about like not trying to be a scientist, but like not also being shy about it's because you can be like also like you can come there with your ego, but also you can come with your with the being aware of how of your shortcomings. And then if you let the shortcomings play a role there, it could be something interesting, I suppose.
Because also, first of all, what we're talking here about, speaking of a collaboration, is also something which you, of course, are familiar with. Meaning that, of course, I apply, let's say, hypothetically, I apply with for the project which is science related, okay? And within the application, I need to submit the explanation, almost literally, what I'm supposed to do. And my role very often is that I don't know what I'm going to do. I cannot explain it in my application what I'm going to do, and I have the whole right to actually keep it like that, because this is the only way to come up with something which can be courageous enough, inventive enough, rather than just the descriptive and didactic. And I think this is also somehow, I would see the problem in applying for many residencies or for many guides, that you have to explain what are you going to do, and in fact you're not an artist anymore, but you're more of an illustrator of your idea. And I don't know how to struggle with that, how to basically what to do with this, because I feel that we should really have the liberty when applying to say, well, we don't really know how this is going to end up with. What will be the effect? How to structure that kind of application with saying, well, I don't know how this is going to end up with. What is going to end up? What will be the effect? It's my right to just not to know.
Yeah, and I think things can be framed that way in a proposal. Absolutely, yeah. That it's an exploration. Yeah. So
you would encourage people, young artists that are here, to also write a proposal without that kind of trying to fulfill the expectation that you're going to directly explain what the project will be about, because it will, as long as we kind of get involved with the project, then the whole beauty of it is actually to be surprised. I mean, I think that the real quality of the work I can recognize in terms of my own practice is also when I'm somehow surprised by the effect, rather than I know, okay, the effect is exactly what I planned.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. Me too. Surprise is what we like.
Yeah.
I agree. That's what makes it interesting, of course. Yeah. Yeah, I would encourage that. I think that's what makes it fun, because that is the problem with some applications, right? It seems that you have to have everything planned, and of course it's more fun not to have anything planned. The artistic process isn't everything's planned, right?
That's it.
Yeah.
So write more application about not knowing what will be the result. I don't know how they will be perceived. The other thing is that on the other side, you have the panel who decides, and as long as you tell them, well, I don't know how this is going to end up with, what will be the response?
Well, right. It's all how it's framed. I mean, they have to. Because the panel also has to feel that you're going to complete something, right? That something will happen. Yeah. So you do have to give them confidence that something will happen. But I think there can be like chaos even, or unknowns within a framework. I mean, you know what I mean? I mean, if it's something like, look, I'm going to lock myself in a room, cover myself with paint, and I don't know what's going to happen, but I know, I'm going to make a big mess in there. It's a framework, right? It's like, okay, we don't know exactly what he'll do, but yeah. So I think, I think you can do that and give them a framework so they know, okay, they're going to be, throwing themselves against the wall in that room. I guess we'll see what happens when it's done. But it sounds like it's not completely open ended. It has a framework to do anything you want within.
That's also, I think, incredibly important point. The way how you structure your work within the framework, but without feeling that you necessarily have to provide all details. Because when you provide all details anyway, it will be boring. I mean, it can also be boring for the panelists, right? For the people who decide. The lack of mystery. That would be I don't know if you'd agree, but within such tasks, sometimes you really need to not complete everything, or at least give the chance for the other side to project their own idea into what you've been proposing.
Absolutely. Yeah, of course.
Because everybody wants to be creative, right? So even the person who decides about your work it's more interesting for this person is to somehow project his own vision, how even if this is not going to end up like within his own vision or projection, but then he at least he'll have some kind of chance to work creatively upon your project, thinking, okay, this is fantastic. It's not fantastic what he wrote, but fantastic how I imagined this.
Right. Yeah, I like that. I like that. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I can just agree with that, of course. As opposed to, you mean, applications making it feel like things have to be within too predictable and too tight, too planned. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. So, anybody have any other questions? I know.
Anybody wants to share screen or ideas?
Yeah, the link again to all of those questions, which I really only answered brief. Well, we went over some of them, but that's the link to all the questions that you submitted that I answered under that link. But if I missed something there, you can, I don't know, email me or something. But that got to most of them, and most of that was about building relationships, right?
No, this is all very important. I think we're all very grateful, Brainerd.
Well, I'm so happy to be here. Yeah, it was good to be here, and and begin to meet everyone. Yeah, if you have any questions I didn't address, I'll put my email in here too. Or you can put me on your list or something. But answer emails. There's my email. And I don't know. Are there any more questions, Dominic, or anyone else?
For me, that is very important things that you have mentioned, and I think that's also very promising what you were saying, that the building one-to-one relation, the idea that this is more important, and then the economy of time that we spend on doing gestures that are not necessarily have to be successful, or they are not going to be successful at all despite the amount of work. Just skip them and build up the personal relations rather than invest your time and energy on writing all these fulfilling this anonymous applications, when the only answer you receive is like not even bothering to mention your name, because on the list they just reply "Dear artist" instead of taking a little bit of effort and writing your name like your personal name, rather than and
even better, a compliment, even better, like a long compliment without even your website or a link attached.
Yes, that's it.
You want a response. All the collectors talk about, they're in it for the conversation, the long term. Nobody buys work right away anyway. They talk to you, they look, they talk, they look, they talk, they look, they buy, maybe. Or their friend does or something. What's it? Long term that way.
Any other questions? Because I mean, I probably have many more, but at the moment I'd like to, because I was quite active, I'd like to give some space to maybe some other people. Are there any reflections on your basis of your insofar practice, or is there anything else you would like to ask Brainerd? Kinga, we cannot hear you.
Yes, we can.
I can hear you. Yeah.
No, we cannot hear you now.
Yeah,
everybody can, but you, Dominic, I think.
Apparently, Dominic, you have a problem.
I hear her.
I switch off, maybe.
Okay, I can hear you now too.
I
No, you're saying you like that as a path forward, right? That seems to be a path that makes sense to you, right? Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Thank you. I'm so glad to hear that. And
If I could share my private experience, it's a funny one because I realized how much the school, the university, establishes like your circle of friends or like the artistic environment. Like this is somehow this kind of place where you get initiated in a way as an artist, and then these contacts they last or they don't. But recently I moved to Berlin, and it is so weird to be in a city. Actually, not that recently; it's been a while. Where you know nobody, and you don't know where. It's like how to find yourself in a city where you really don't belong, and you don't have a school like this hub where you can always go back to and meet people that you know. To simply just talk about work, get any little feedback, not to mention like exhibiting or any of that. So like I'm just talking like mostly like commenting on what Yukinga said, that it's really important. This I was always thinking I don't need anyone. Like I'm really happy just to be closed in my room and doing my work. But now these people that I didn't need are kind of gone. It is another story. So yeah, I think I know what you mean, and what you mentioned here sounds really interesting, and something that might be useful in a situation where you actually are like an outcast in a way.
yeah, thank you. I'm so glad to hear that. Yeah, I mean that's so true. If you feel like an outcast or on the edge, it's just a very simple idea, but there's nothing that brings you in like flattering the person of your interest. You
I
know,
mean, it's really funny. I've been doing this
really.
digging, like almost like a detective, connecting the dots. Oh, this person does this here and this, and now I'm kind of having this map in a way what's going on in the city. Because if you come here as like just to check the gallery weekend or the Berlin Biennale, it's one thing. But if you actually want to become like a mole and dig a little deeper, there's a lot. But it takes a while. It really takes a while to crack a city, like a crack an art map in a way. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. No, that's true. It does take time. One person at a time.
yeah.
Mm. Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that. Yeah, I so agree. Mm. I mean, unless you meant a question by that, but
I'm not sure if it's a question. I just wonder how to, because like I didn't think of it until I was in this situation. Like because the university, it's an easy one. Like you graduate and then you, if it's a bigger city, you just stay there, and you're kind of fine. So it's not. I mean, I'm kind of answering this question myself as in my research, but it's an interesting issue actually. Like I don't know, maybe how like to just move away from what you know and then start kind of from scratch. And it's just like it just reminded you because you mentioned some Kinga, like this environment of people who, and I know how important this is exactly. Recently it's been on my mind as well. So
how important getting out of your area is, or finding new areas, you mean, that kind of the importance of sort of new people, new territory, new worlds, like or is that about finding like a community too, right? Finding
how weird is it to go to an art opening alone and just stand there? It's just a really exotic experience because like back home, you go to the gallery and you know literally everybody, and it's just some fun, some art talk, blah blah. But if you, it's just I don't know, it's interesting. And I think I'm not probably also alone in this, because everybody who moves, and a lot of people move, we are all more or less social. But yeah, it's interesting how you have to like crack it in a way from like scratch. Just
it is. I don't know if you guys have seen, there's a series, if you get that there, on Anna Sorkin, who
oh my god, yes, I just saw it recently.
You saw, right? So that's such a great art world thing, right? Here's a person who's arguably kind of on the edge of delusion and sanity, and and is alone and has no way in, and remarkably finds a way in by creating a presentation. I mean, I think that's very telling in a way, you know, and very interesting about human nature and how do you do that. And you know, especially when people are rejecting her. Well, I'd agree if you knew a top curator.
Mm.
And the top curator says, I'd be interested if you knew another top curator. The architect says, I'd be interested if you knew a curator. You know, it's the cycle goes around. She doesn't know anybody, so has to make that connection happen. And it's a true story. It made multiple connections happen. And you know, in a way that though Anna Sorkin's been demonized, what she did is not so different than how people ingratiate themselves in the art world and raise money for projects. I mean, think of filmmaker, has a vision, you know, raises a lot of money, $200,000 or more to make his or her film. The film doesn't really work out. Nobody watched it. You know, I mean, that happens, right? All the time. It's a, you know, what she did maybe was different, but it was not so different, you know, that I think it's telling somehow how you, anyway, I don't mean to make too much of a thing of that, but how you can get into a world that locks you out, that you feel locked out of in your
I was really fascinated with her. I think for like one day I like Googled everything about her because I thought this was it was fascinating on many levels, and I don't think it was. I thought it was totally fine what she did. I never understood the whole.
I didn't either. I know. I feel that way too. I mean, one way to experience what she experienced, and this is really fun to do. I do this in New York galleries a lot. Go into a gallery. I mean, try this week anywhere, like a really good gallery, and wear something different than what looks like an artist's outfit, and say to the person at the front desk, "Can I talk to somebody about that work on the wall over there?" And depending on the gallery, the curator will come running right out. I mean, like that, they'll come out and they'll say, hi, well, what was your question? And, you know, you're an artist, so you can say, well, that work over there, I wanted to ask about the artist and the medium. And, you know, they're immediately like sizing you up. Do you have money? What's going on here? You know, and it's interesting to watch because you can stay very removed and play that game, which I've done many times at many galleries where you're just kind of quiet. You know, what's your name? Well, I'm looking for a friend right now. Okay, you don't have to reveal anything if you don't want to. And what they'll do is they'll tell you, they'll sell you on the artist. If you show more interest than I have, they'll start asking, what's in your collection? And you can either say, I don't want to talk about that, or it's another collection, or it's a private collection, or you can start making stuff up if you want. But the power dynamic switches right there. And it's pretty exciting to experience as an artist too. Because you see, they're trying to impress you. They're trying to make you like them, and that's a nice feeling to come from a top gallery director or curator. It's the Anna Delvey thing, right? But with much softer, right? Much. So yeah, just go into a gallery. It's always still a favorite thing of mine to do and ask about a work, and you have an interesting conversation, and you also realize how little even top gallerists or curators or directors know about art. I mean, it's kind of remarkable. Like, artists know a lot, right? You go into these good galleries and they're talking about an artist who's even maybe secondary market. And you may know a lot about that artist, but the way they start talking, you realize they don't really know what they're talking about, you know? And that's instructive and interesting and, you know, human.
I think there's a question in the chat.
After getting my degree, what was your biggest struggle professionally? You know, making enough money to to feed myself. You know, I got out of school thinking I'm going to be an artist. I'm going to get grants. I think I remember the conversation telling my father that, and he was like, "What are you talking about? That's insane." And I think I was crying at some point, saying, you know, I'm going to do it. I'm going to get grants. I'm going to do stuff, and it'll work out. You know, so I did that, and the biggest struggle was immediately getting work shown. And so within a year, I did open an artist space. I opened a gallery in this remote area, Rhode Island, and I started. I don't know. I learned a lot of hard lessons fast. Quickly, I learned, wow, not as easy to get shows as I thought. You know, I mean, it's just a year out of college, but still, I thought this was just going to unfold. And then I'm a good artist after all. And then, and it didn't. And I realized all these applications. So I opened a gallery and with my girlfriend, and we actually showed ourselves and other artists. You know, we had we had like 1 or 2 person shows rotated regularly. It was really an artist run space. And that taught me a lot because I saw artists come in and present themselves to me, which I totally wasn't ready for. I was only, you know, like whatever, 25 or something. So I saw how sometimes things were really badly presented. And I learned, yeah, a lot of lessons. That was a big struggle. You know, it was a big struggle to make money at that space. It was a struggle to learn how to get press, you know, which wasn't working. And I realized it was politically connected or financially connected. I was trying to get a review of the gallery that we were running, and the newspaper said, well, most people, you know, take an ad in our newspaper. And I said, well, okay, I'll take an ad. And then I take an ad. Well, no, a season's worth of ads. Well, a season's worth of ads. Okay, that's like $1,000. So then I take it, and there's still no review. And I said, but there hasn't been a review of the gallery. And he said, well, you know, you had to go with the whole season. I said, I did. And he said, no, you missed the first few weeks. I said, oh my God, you're serious? It's like the world is so unfair, right? So you know, at that point, I thought, you know, fuck it, I'll start my own magazine. I'll start my own newspaper. What does this cost to do anyway? And so those kind of struggles, and I did end up starting a publication, but struggles of just like, what? How is this working? You know, how did that person get into that big museum or that alternative space? The struggle was not understanding it at all. What was next? And I just saw myself as like one of these artists that I read about in history books that was suddenly going to climb to something quickly because of, you know, I don't know, my ego, my art, and you know, it was tough and a long process to figure out, I guess, how to present yourself or how to talk about things. You know, I mean, it still is a struggle. It's not like I figured it all out, but the etiquette of speaking, you know, of just getting what you want and then knowing, like, what do you really want, you know, and asking for it, you know. I think that was my biggest struggle. You know, I mean, I think that's maybe a universal thing, right? It's almost like a relationship struggle, right? You're in a relationship, you know, what do you really want? You know, you know, are you communicating it? Are you asking for it? What's, you know, that whole thing of human interaction I struggled most with professionally, right? How do you make those connections? How do you build that friendship? How do I get into that inner circle? You know, and even once you're in it, like the inner circle for me, the glory was I want to be in the Whitney Biennial because they talk about those people like they're so special. And then once I got in it, I was like, wow, I'm special. And then I'm trying to reach curators who are ignoring me. And I thought, like, what is going on? You know, I don't understand. And so there was endless amounts of that I don't understand. And I mean, just to complete the answer to that was, yeah, it was a curator I met at a dinner from the new museum. I feel like, wow, I'm the Whitney. I've got these connections. I'm kind of full of myself. I kept calling her and saying, hi, you know, I call her office and her secretary would say, whoever it was, who's calling? Brainerd, until she'd say, hold on a minute. Oh, Anne's in a meeting right now. Oh, okay. So then I call back again. It's Brainerd, you know, Anne's in a meeting right now. I'm thinking, yeah, but I'm Brainerd. I was at that dinner with those fancy artists from the Whitney Biennial. Why isn't she picking up the phone? I'm already feeling that first, like, oh my God, I'm being ghosted, shut out or something, right? And so then I was pretty green and bold then. So then I called again. He said, you know, who's calling? I said, well, I'm calling from the New York Times. I may do a potential interview on her. 1 second. She's on the phone like that. Right? And I was like, Anne, it's Brainerd. I'm trying to reach you, you know? And then of course, oh, I'm so busy. Sorry. You know? But I also realized, wow, if you ask somebody for an interview, you can access almost anybody in the world. Right? It's that kind of compliment thing. It's, I want to see and hear you. All I want to do is see and hear you. That's pretty attractive, right, to people. And that opened up a whole world for me. That helped with that struggle. It helped with, so I started talking to curators and museum directors, basically saying, like, how do you do everything you do? How do you find those artists? What are you doing now? You know, you're looking for somebody? Or artists, I'd ask, how did you get your first show? How did your career evolve? And yeah, and that helped a lot with that struggle. That's how the whole interview thing began. That's why I'm obsessive about the interviews, because it's kind of a turn on to be able to hear and see someone else, because when you give someone that attention, you're listening to them, you're seeing them, especially if it sounds like you understand what they're saying. It generates a lot of love. They're very interested in who you are. They like that. We all like attention. Like, you're really listening. So that helped a lot. Still does. To be completely honest, I usually don't talk about like this, but it's interesting the way this is, how these questions and the questions you've asked have gone.
Great. Brainerd, many thanks. This was wonderful. I don't know. It's almost 2 hours, so I don't know how do you feel to continue, but you're always welcome in our crowd.
Thank you. Happy to be back anytime. Yeah, great to see you guys. Always happy to be back.
Let you know about the recording of your fantastic the presentation and talk, and I hope you'll be able to join us in our next the next series of the talks within the next semester, which I hope it will happen. Hopefully,
would love that. Would love that.
So thank you again. Any more questions?
If I missed something or you want to email me, you can do that too.
Absolutely. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
It's a lot to me, also to my students. We feel much more, I would say, richer in terms of the especially the time what we should invest in, and you convinced us that the relation, direct relation, is something really worth investing, apart from the time that we spend in solitude in our studio. So thank you so much again.
You're so welcome. You're so welcome. Thanks for all your questions and interest.
Thank you so much.
Bye. All right, take care. Bye.
Okay. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you a lot.